Welcome to our podcast, Footlong With American Cheese, where we discuss APUSH periods 1 through 9. Episode 1 is period 1 of APUSH, 1496 through 1601, pre-contact with Native Americans and early colonization. All right, so what is pre-contact?
That was the period when there was no contact with Europeans and the New World before Christopher Columbus sailed to the New World.
Yeah, and then
But
early colonization.
It is heavily debated because Vikings did land there, but we're not going to get into that.
Yeah.
And first off, natives, they had their own techniques. They built up maize and other crops and had glorious empires like the Aztec and the Mayans.
Let's not be culturally insensitive on this.
All right, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
All right, and then but it wasn't really contact free, right? Right?
Yeah, I mean, there was already warring tribes in North America between like the Chesapeake and like the other ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of tribal conflicts. So America wasn't necessarily contact free before the Europeans showed up. So that already establishes kind of like an American contact, which is kind of the theme of this podcast. Conflicts throughout periods 1 through 9. Let's see. Conflict with the indigenous peoples, though, started mainly in our APUSH learning when the Spanish and English arrived. You guys want to describe that?
Yeah, so they came to the New World mainly for 3 reasons. The 3 G's it's known of: God, glory, and what's the other one? I forgot.
Gold.
Oh yeah, definitely gold, because that was the main reason that
Mercantilism.
that Spain sent, what's his name? Christopher Columbus.
Columbus.
Just a quick question for our viewers: what is mercantilism?
Mercantilism is when you
Okay, and
Stop looking at me like that.
mercantilism is the idea that there's like a finite amount of wealth in the world, and in order to consolidation. You want to get as much of that wealth as possible.
The colonies exist to support the mother country.
Yeah, imagine there's like one piece of pie, and every country wants, or one pie, and every country wants that biggest piece. And a way to do that is to colonize and get the wealth from those nations.
It was popularized in old European history, especially through the French. It's where you would want to minimize your imports and maximize your exports.
The amount of gold a nation had determined its social status in reference to other nations and how much power it had on the global scale.
Yeah, and this was a big source of conflict initially, because each country was colonizing, competing with one another. English and the British, they weren't fans of each other. Yeah, they were warring nations, not warring in the sense of like actual physical war at the time at least, but they were competing nations. They each wanted to see the other one's downfall.
They were rivals.
Rivals, yeah.
And these motivations in getting gold and becoming more and more powerful as a nation is what motivated people to go to the New World and topple empires in search of gold and glory.
Yeah, that's mainly with the Spanish.
Yeah, but for the English, I would say it was because of the Protestant Reformation that was taking back home.
That started some conflict back in Europe for the reason, because they were religiously oppressed, like Puritans and stuff. They weren't allowed to freely practice, which was a direct cause of them coming here, which is an example of conflict. But let's talk about the Spanish a little bit more. What's some conflict they brought?
The conflict they brought disease to the New World, and that almost wiped out about 90% of the native population. That's a long-term effect that it had on the natives, and that already put them on the back foot, already set up for colonization by the New World. I mean, the Old World. Sorry.
Yeah, and they kind of seized that moment when their general Hernan Cortez sort of like took control of the Aztec Empire, and specifically the capital, which is Tenochtitlan, and
Tenochtitlan?
Yeah, I mean, how do you say it? Oh, anyways, yeah, he took power over that, and he ultimately used disease to kind of like ward off all the Indians.
And then the remaining Indians he put underneath
Native Americans.
And then the remaining Native Americans he put under the encomienda system, which systematically put them through a cycle of slavery.
Yeah, this is a really big conflict. Like, this is kind of the start of a big conflict in America in general with slavery. I know early Americans in the English colonies, indentured servants. You want to explain what an indentured servant is?
Yeah, indentured servant is not necessarily a slave. It's someone who works for, I guess they're not getting paid a lot, but it's
like contract labor.
Yeah, contract labor. And you're typically a white person too, because they all have rights and they get paid a little to do a lot of work. And then that started another rebellion. Was it Bacon's Rebellion?
I don't think.
Yeah, it was Bacon's Rebellion.
I think that's farther on down.
Yeah,
the road,
that's what
we'll get
say
there.
that for later.
Most indentured servants came to the New World by promising servitude in exchange for transport to the New World to more wealthier families.
Yeah, they essentially became like temporary slaves on a contract to get passage to the New World. And
We'll see something similar to this down the road a couple periods later, known as sharecropping, where you are
A couple periods,
you are
like period
necess-
7.
I know you're free, but not necessarily because you're still tied to labor due to a contract. But
Bring-
that's
a
miles
couple
down
of-
the
yeah.
road.
Bringing it back to the
But
Spanish.
The English and Spanish are not the only ones.
Hold on,
It's
hold
like
on, hold on,
French.
hold on.
French
But
and
first,
Dutch. And-
all right, but first, bringing it back to the Spanish, the Pueblo Revolt. Pueblo Revolt. What do you think of that?
I think that's period 2.
No.
We'll get that, but let's talk to the reasons about that. The encomienda system, not only did it force these natives into severe labor that was very dangerous, had like high mortality rates. There's also missionary Catholics. Missionary Catholic is someone who wants to spread their religion to others, but their methods weren't always so peaceful. They're very forceful. They weren't very respected of native culture. This caused a lot of dissent. This is a big conflict in the sense that we're imposing people's culture on others.
It was generally assumed that if you weren't going to convert to Christianity, you'd die.
Yeah,
And so
or
a lot
just
of
be
people,
forced into it.
and due to like the military technology that the Spanish had over the Aztecs and just any Native American groups, which was metal tools, which the natives in the New World did not possess, chances are the natives lost every single time. So you saw either a lot of native deaths or a lot of natives converting to Christianity against their will.
Yeah, in many of our articles, like the DBQs, the LEQs, the SEQs, we see multiple times of articles referring by the Spanish referring to Native Americans as barbarians and uncivilized, and that,
savages is a big word.
and that more like white man's burden, and how the Spanish viewed the Native Americans as lesser people and that they needed to be civilized or saved.
I think this
Yeah,
is
but they also married with them too, and it was
Yeah,
they haven't got over that.
under
sentiment.
the
And
caste
that-
system. The caste system.
And that developed the caste system, yes.
caste
The
system.
Spanish caste system, right?
The Spanish
Just to
caste
clarify.
system. Not the Indian caste, like Indian as in
I'm
like.
a Brahmin.
Okay. No, not that caste system, but the Spanish caste system, or the casta system as it was called. The casta system put. What was the tiers? It was.
It was
It was
Spanish,
Spaniards,
Spanish-
like
Like pure
people,
Spaniards from
people
Spain,
that came from
and then
Spain.
Spaniards born in the New World.
What was that?
Then,
They had a
then
special name.
then
right?
mestizos,
Mestizos were a mix of
Spaniard blood and Native
yeah.
American blood, and then there was I think pure Native American blood, and then there was Native and slaver.
There was
Native and
mulattoes.
African slave.
Mulattoes.
No,
Yeah,
I think Africans
I think I can
were
look
just
this up
at the
right now.
bottom regardless, which was unfortunate.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what
Which
introduced the-
spells the precursors for slavery.
Precursors for slavery, yeah. There was some slave trade in this period, but it was not at the same level as it was in some other ones. This was more
as
of like
it's
the
Columbian
seeds.
exchange.
Yeah, this is more of the seeds of said. Yeah. Well, the Columbian exchange
It
isn't.
came out later.
Yeah, but it isn't as much involved in the conflict in this period right now. It will fuel like slavery or.
Okay,
I've
I
got,
have
I've
it
got a
up.
diagram
I'll
of the
explain it real
caste
quick.
system out. I know
So-
you viewers at home can't really see it, but he'll explain it.
I'm just gonna run through it real quick. At the top we have the Peninsulares, which is the Spanish bloods born in Spain, and then we have the Criollos. The Criollos, I think the double L is part of my.
Creoles. They're
Creoles.
called Creoles now.
Well, that's the gringo way to pronounce it. That's the descendants of the Spanish born in America, but pure white blood still. Then we have the mestizos, which is a mix of Spanish blood and Indian blood. And then lower we have the mulattos, which is Caucasian and African blood, Africans being slaves at this time. And then we have Native Americans, which are at the second to last tier. And then at the very bottom we have African slaves.
Yeah. That was in Spain. Let's talk about the Dutch and the French now, because I know they're less thought of.
Yeah, so these were quite similar, more similar to the Spanish. They wanted to establish trade relations with them.
Yeah,
specifically
as a-
fur.
They were there for the greed part. They
gold.
Yeah, they
gold
also
part.
they
wanted-
also they also
I wouldn't say great, it's
intermarried.
economic reasons, all right? And a lasting impact in the continent.
they wanted money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which led to like them holding the Louisiana territory, which we're gonna eventually get. That comes later though.
Mhm.
So they wanted to establish a fur trade with these Native Americans. They were more, huh? Oh yeah, they settled in the middle colonies.
But they didn't settle.
Established trading posts.
They
Yeah,
weren't.
they weren't as big of settlers as Spanish.
They weren't trying to set down permanent residents.
They weren't going to stay there. They went in there for a quick buck, and they wanted to.
for a trade.
And
They were
wanted to
unlike
leave.
the British, and
Yeah.
unlike the British in a sense that
They did
weren't
marry.
They weren't
Like
sending
Spanish.
families.
They
down
did.
south.
They did marry some natives.
Yeah, and they developed somewhat, I guess, better relationships.
Yeah, there's-
with the natives, and we'll see later down the road. Like, I think 1 or 2 periods later, the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War, if you took European history, which the natives and Americans, they fought together, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, this was like caused a lot less conflicts in there compared to
English
Yeah.
and Spanish
English
colonies.
and Spanish. There's still like the looming threat of disease. However,
The way they went about it was a lot easier. Like the French and the Dutch came in there, they were just like, hey,
they're very accommodating.
we want to
They're
make
kinda
a
in
we
the
want to make a
middle.
profit. You know how we can make a profit by helping us trap these animals so that we can get their fur,
There's a whole lot more mutual respect. Yeah.
and then we'll give you something for that. So we'll pay you. You help us.
Yeah, I would kind of sort of put them French in the middle between English and the Spanish, where the English would completely like expel these Indians, these Native Americans, while the Spanish eventually were more like friendly with the Native American. I mean, after the Pueblo Revolt and stuff like that, where they approached them with a much more respectful way, I would say.
Initially,
Rather than- yeah.
initially they were respectful too, because in the Aztec Empire, I forget the conquistador, but
Hernan Cortez.
Hernan Cortez, he went in there like, oh hey, we're gonna be buddy buddy, and then he took opportunity of the disease that went around the Aztec Empire to topple it. He didn't go there initially.
No, I remember we read a document somewhere that one of the Aztec leaders, they're like, "Hey, can we like see your chief?" And they did, and as soon as they saw the chief, they like jumped him, and they took over.
So
They
the
took-
Aztecs,
they took
Aztecs
all
were under the
those.
impression that the Spanish were there for peaceful reasons.
And
Even
they
actually,
got-
which I don't know why they believed that, because they saw that the Spanish were allied with other American tribes at the time to fight
They got duped.
to fight the Aztecs, because they were like the supreme tribe in that one area. So I don't know why they would assume that there would be peaceful potential for peace negotiations,
Yeah.
and that led to their downfall.
Unfortunately.
Ratio.
What?
No comment.
All right, and then English colonization. How did English differ from the Spanish? I know we brought that up a little bit, but like, how did the English differ from the Spaniards?
They
Yeah.
wanted no relations with the Native Americans. They wanted no intermarriage because they brought their own families, so they opted not to include them in their civilizations and expelled them.
Speak up.
I apologize. If you couldn't hear me, I said that there was no intermarriage and they chose not to live with the natives and they expelled them from their colonies. If anyone else would like to go into detail about it.
Yeah. Were there any like? I know the movie Pocahontas. Not exactly the best way to learn about U.S. history, but you could see a lot of that conflict there. They just weren't fans of each other. There was a lot of infighting between them. There was no, huh?
Nothing, I'm just referencing
Oh
the song.
yeah. He's singing the song under his breath. If any viewers would like to know what he's saying. No, but you can see it's not exactly historically accurate, but it shows there's some truth to it. There's divisions between them. They're fighting between each other. They push each other away. They don't really live among each other like they did with the Spanish and the Dutch.
Yeah, many of these colonies were very private, like the Jamestown colony, which was the first colony that the English established, and the Roanoke, which
They disappeared.
Yeah, they just disappeared.
Many people speculate that the Roanoke colony did actually fully assimilate with another Native American tribe, but that's not fully confirmed. That could be a piece of evidence of like non-conflict, but we're not here for non-conflict. We're here to talk about problems. So
Yeah. Throughout the Spanish and the English settlements, we really get the underlying theme of the white man's burden, and how that is a everlasting conflict throughout American
Yeah.
history.
yeah, it wasn't officially named the White Man's Burden at this time. That's more through
It's more American history.
that's more manifest destiny. That's where the term emerged. But you can see the roots of it all throughout history, before and after. Yeah.
Yeah, Spaniards coming in, putting themselves at the top of the caste system, and then enslaving Native Americans, and then once they died out, bringing in the African Americans to replace them. The English coming in.
Oh, we never clarified why they brought in the African Americans.
No,
So-
that's a little bit of period too.
Oh, okay.
We'll talk about it. But yeah, on our next episode, we're going to be talking a lot about disease a little bit, and then African slavery. That's a big problem going forward, like a big conflict in America. This is going to set the grounds for a lot of periods coming forward, all the way into the 1960s even. Well, there's not even slavery there. There's still the lasting effects. This leaves a huge scar in America. So I guess I can't say look forward to slavery, but keep an eye out for that in our next episode. And I think that's time. I think we covered a lot of our history. We covered Sorry. So be sure to tune into our next episode of Footlong with American Cheese. We'll be discussing period 2 of A-Push. You guys want to do a little preview of next episode?
No, I would like to point out, it's kind of weird that Andrew's not wearing any clothes right now.
I'm gonna have to cut that out.
No, he doesn't. That's kind of funny.
All right, I'm glad you enjoyed our podcast. Stay tuned for Footlong American Cheese. Thank you. And next week is period 2.